To celebrate 10 episodes of a show no one watches except to dislike the ukulele episode, I've decided to take on the biggest video game Kickstarter campaign ever. That's right, Potato Planet. What's that? A game about shooting potatoes is not the biggest Kickstarter ever. Uh-huh. A gaming console? What? No, that's stupid. How are they gonna pull that off? No, Alright, fine. Alright, I'll talk about that, okay. I'm being told that the biggest video game campaign is actually the Ouya, not Potato Planet, an Android-powered video game console designed to play mobile games on your TV, but was also meant to be the go-to development platform for independent developers due to its ease of development and the Free the Games Fund. It all seems so absurd now, doesn't it? How did some random company come along and sell 63,000 people on a silver box that plays mobile games on a TV? No doubt it was the spirit and the thrill of what was happening that got us to open our wallets. Another video game console was being made outside the big three we've been stuck with for over a decade, and it was going to focus on indie gaming, being funded through crowdfunding. That was such an exciting concept back in 2012. It was the talk of the gaming community and beyond, getting featured on news sites the world over. The Ouya was looking to make history as the first crowdfunded indie machine on the market, and who wouldn't want to be part of that? Boxer 8 was formed in 2012 by Julie Ehrman. Julie had a short history in the world of gaming, and none in the developmental or hardware side. Instead, her background included a 2-year run as vice president of IGN, and before that she was a publishing manager, whatever the hell that is, at Vivendi Universal Games for a year and a half. Regardless, it was her desire to not only get into development of games, but to create a gaming console that would be designed specifically for independent game development. It was an ambitious project, but she hired on experienced people like designer, Yevs Behar, and, Mufi Gadayali. I apologize for that. Within a few months, they had already created a prototype of a machine they were calling the Ouya. It would use an Android operating system, and in fact would pretty much just be an Android phone in a box with slightly more powerful specs and a controller. That would explain why they got a prototype working so quickly, and how they were able to port all those mobile games over. There were several big selling points, including how it was pitched as an indie console, but that wasn't all. Since it was pretty much an Android phone in a box, the price was pretty low at $100. All games would be free to try, meaning you could download any game available on the system or an Android device and play it for free for a long period of time. Boxer 8, later renamed Ouya Inc., would also establish the Free the Games Fund to help independent developers, but we'll get back to that later. Boxer 8 needed more funds to move forward, $950,000. As much as that sounds, it's nothing for a video game console. Beyond nothing. The $8.5 million they got isn't much either in context, and if that's like finding change in the bottom of a couch, then the initial $950K they are asking for is like finding a penny on the sidewalk that's covered in gum. 2012 was a hell of a year for crowdfunding. Double Fine came to town and put the concept on the map. Sure, it had been around before then, but they solidified it, at least in terms of gaming, as a legitimate tool. A great way of developing a game that most publishers wouldn't want to touch. What better example could there be of such a thing than the Ouya? Wanting to follow the indie spirit, Ehrman and company chose Kickstarter to get those additional gummy pennies. And the rest is history, as Ouya obliterated its initial goal and rocketed towards over $8 million, the most successful video game campaign by a factor of over $2 million, without the benefit of an E3 reveal and Sony's backing like number 2 on the list Shenmue 3 had, and the 6th most funded campaign ever. The campaign page is a masterclass in talking something up. Grandiose ideas that either can't be backed up or sound great on paper but are kinda meh in reality. We just added game streaming through OnLive, the top of the page screams. Final Fantasy will be on Ouya, and we have an exclusive game! And Vivo has agreed to put their music videos on Ouya. XMBC adds a streaming media app, with TuneIn and iHeartRadio adding music. Wow, we've never been able to listen to music before, and Final Fantasy? You mean that thing we've played on every single system and is about the last thing you think of when you hear the term indie gaming? It's actually amazing how much of the page is just preamble and fluff. I was going to read it all, but we'd be here all day. From the very top of the page, the section called "The Revolution Will Be Televised" is kind of marketing corporate crap you'd expect to hear from Mad Men. It goes on and on about what's hot, how modern consoles suck, how the TV is great, and there's even a lame attempt at trying to appeal to gamers. You busted your ass just to find out the princess was in another castle. You fought bosses that told you repeatedly how much you suck. You taped a blanket to half your screen so your friend couldn't see where you were. You traded the best players on your team just so you can have the perfect season. And you did it all on the TV. It really does read like a cold, cynical marketing pitch than a team of people passionate about a project they really want to do. Just read the revolution will be televised section. We've packed this little box full of power. Developers will have access to Ouya's open design so they can produce their games for the living room, taking advantage of everything the TV has to offer. Best of all, Ouya's world-class controller, console, and interface come in one beautiful, inexpensive package. All the games on it will be free, at least to try. One of the questions in the FAQ section asks, will the Ouya be playable outside the US? And their response was literally, yes, hola, as if everyone outside the US speaks Spanish. Brilliant. Great games from great developers. Developers can wave farewell to the roadblocks of bringing a console game to market. Anyone can make a game. Every Ouya console is a dev kit. No need to purchase a license or an expensive SDK. It's built on Android, so developers already know how it works. That doesn't mean Ouya is an Android port. You can create the next big title in your bedroom, just like the good old days. Who needs pants? Oh, pants. Oh, that means something different in England. I'd also like to point out this section is kind of BS. As I said, it's called Great Games from Great Developers, and it lists quotes from famous developers, or at least famous games from their developers. However, none of them were actually stating for sure they'd create games for the console. The whole thing reeks of deception on the part of Ouya, saying these developers will be making games for the console, given the title of the section, but that wasn't really true. Some, most even, of their games were eventually playable on the Ouya, but they were made available for all mobile devices or were already available on them anyway. None of them made games specifically for the Ouya. In fact, as far as I know, only 2 developers made games specifically for the Ouya. One was Matt Thorson, who made Towerfall, a genuinely great game that also went on to be the system's highest-selling game, at a whopping 7,000 copies sold. Towerfall was eventually ported to other systems under the name Towerfall Ascension, so they lost that one. The other developer who made an exclusive game was Airtight Games, who made Soulfjord. You may remember them from Quantum Conundrum and Murdered Soul Suspect, and also as the company that went bankrupt not long after releasing Soulfjord, which is why to this day Soulfjord remains the only game exclusive to the Ouya. And that turned out to be the Ouya's biggest failure. It didn't have any games. Everything you could play on it was already available on mobile devices, the PC, or other consoles that likely ran better on, played better on, and looked better on. And since most of its games came from the Android marketplace, it also inherited the mobile store's awful market with absolutely no quality control. Anyway, back to the Kickstarter. They go on to say that the design of the console is very important to them, talking about the controller and listing the technical aspects. They spent a lot of time talking about the controller, by the way. We are designing the controller to be a love letter to console gaming. It will have everything you've learned to love. Fast buttons, triggers, laser-precise analog sticks, a D-pad, and it will have a touchpad for any games making the trek from mobile or tablet to the TV. We call it the Stradivarius of controllers, and we hope developers will be inspired to take gameplay to a new level with it. And the surprisingly brief page wraps up with a snippet about how they need you to back the project in order to move past prototyping, put it into production, get all the sales licenses, and send out developer kits. Despite raising over $8 million, the bright future for Ouya turned dark almost instantly. The developer kits were sent out to overwhelmingly negative feedback, which is fair enough since it was the first run. The controllers were panned for their cheapness and the fact that the buttons were all the same shape, just colored differently, meaning colorblind people literally could not play the console. Yeah, not quite the Stradivarius, is it? Ouya tried to attend E3, but they weren't admitted, so instead they held an event outside the parking lot, which ended with police trying to shut them down. It didn't help that Ehrman stated that she hoped to produce a new console every single year like it was Call of Duty or Madden. And we can't help but talk about the Free the Games Fund, which is the one thing that turned Ouya from a glorious indie savior riding a unicorn into a hideous monster in the eyes of the public. The Free the Games Fund was a fund set up by Ouya aimed at helping independent developers. Any game developer who created a Kickstarter could join the fund, as long as their Kickstarter was successful, obviously. Ouya would donate however much money the game's initial budget was, up to $50,000. The catch was that the game would have to be exclusively available on the Ouya for 6 months. For example, last week's cat was on Lobo Destroyo, which was part of this fund. The game's initial funding goal was $35,000, and after its successful Kickstarter campaign, Ouya gave them another $35,000, meaning they had over $70,000 to work with because they ended up raising $41,000 on Kickstarter. Numbers, numbers, numbers! Oh, I'd also like to correct myself because in that Lobo Destroyo video, I said the exclusivity was for 1 month, not 6, so apologies for that. Your initial reaction to hearing this might be to say, well, what's the problem with that? So that sounds like a great way of helping independent developers who might not have budgeted enough for the Kickstarter, or, whatever. Golly, I'm not as good at articulating my points as you are, Josh. I love you. To which I would say, thank you. Also, there are a couple of problems, to say the least. The first is that, right out of the gate, developers were trying to cheat the system. 2 of them spring to mind, one of which is Gridiron Football, which I talked about in my sports video. Developers MogoTXT raised over $171,000 with only 183 backers. That's about $935 per backer. The reason for these high numbers was because many of the game's backers were actually game industry friends of the people at MogoTXT who were propping up the campaign in an effort to get Ouya's money. Now, they actually got away with it because this wasn't technically against Kickstarter's or Ouya's rules, though MogoTXT did voluntarily pull out of the fund. One developer who didn't get away with it, though, was Sam Chandola behind Elementary My Dear Homes. Chandola and friends were accused of creating fake accounts and inflating the funding of the game, pushing it past its funding goal and thus ensuring their cut from Ouya. Kickstarter investigated these claims and found them to be true and suspended the campaign, and Chandola got nothing. Because of this, Ouya was forced to quickly scramble to amend their fund. Now the minimum was $10,000, and each Kickstarter campaign had to have a certain number of backers. The timed exclusivity was also revised, down to 1 month per $10,000 donated, which is where my initial mistake in Lobo Destroyo video came from. Destructoid ran a piece about the fund and its changes, and Chris Carter does a great job of summing up its problems. All of this is a noble effort, but Ouya is still refusing to ignore the problem, putting a band-aid on top of a mortal wound. The solution isn't to retool or rework this terrible program to be more confusing with more arbitrary provisions attached. It's to get rid of it entirely and set up a simple transparent indie pub fund, or explore other ways of enticing indie devs to contribute. I think he means Ouya is still ignoring the problem, but you get the drift. The whole concept made no sense and felt more like a game show competition aimed at bringing attention to how great Boxer 8 was rather than a fund to help game developers. But even then, that's not where this story ends. You see, the Ouya was a failure, as I've mentioned and alluded to throughout this video. It sold poorly, and statistics indicate that as many as 73% of Ouya owners didn't send a single penny on a game, instead using the free games feature to play a bunch of stuff without paying for it. Obviously, with 73% of your user base not paying for stuff, that means you're not making much money, you're probably losing more. By 2015, the writing was on the wall. Despite all the partnerships, the hype, the marketing, and the Free the Games fund, the Ouya was dead in the water. Erman sold her company to Razer and left with an amount of money reported in the $10 million range. Interestingly, Razer purchased the Ouya name and software, but were quick to state they had no interest in continuing the hardware. They also didn't have any interest in honoring the Free the Games fund. According to Polygon, only 25% of indie developers received all the money they were supposed to. Another 25% only received some money, and the other 50% didn't get a single gum-covered penny, and an estimated $600,000 was still sitting in the fund unpaid when Razer acquired them. At first, Razer stated they weren't going to honor the fund. This, of course, led to backlash, which led Razer to reverse their decision. Now, the Ouya is basically non-existent. You can't purchase one on their website anymore, and they go on eBay from anywhere between $40 and $150. As to why Razer bought Ouya in the first place, it seems the answer lies in China. Razer now has all the games from Ouya, plus its OS ready for their device, Forge TV, and they're basically going to sell it in China, which is an untapped Android market. Basically, it's really boring stuff about pandering to China. I have to give Boxer 8 / Ouya Inc. / Julia Erman credit for one thing. They lived up to what they promised in the Kickstarter. They created a micro, indie-focused console that put mobile games on your TV, they made it inexpensive, and they at least tried to spread the love with the Free the Games fund, even if it was more of a publicity stunt than anything. The problems were twofold, though. Boxer 8/Ouya Inc. clearly wasn't the team for the job. They constantly delayed sale of the unit, the developer kits and prototypes were constantly met with negative reviews, the final product didn't change at all and was really cheap and flimsy, the Free the Games fund was a complete disaster, and they really failed to capitalize on the successful Kickstarter by attracting big developers. They focused more on mobile gaming as a crutch, and that's where the other problem came into play. People just don't want to play mobile games on their TV. That's the whole point of mobile gaming, to be mobile. Sony learned that the hard way with the PSP and Vita, and iOS and Android gaming have overtaken Nintendo. It's not about playing big, elaborate console games on the go, it's about playing something for 5 or 10 minutes on the ride home or when you're pooping. Oh, don't act like you don't do it. Hey everybody, big news in the world of Cliqist on YouTube. I am happy to announce, although I don't know if I can actually say this yet, oh well, that I will no longer be the sole video producer for this channel. Lucky you. Monarch Smasher Nathaniel Lyles, who used to be making videos around here, will be returning in the coming weeks. You can hear him on the Cliqist Reviews Organic Panic, for example, and a few others. I've also began searching for a third person, too. I've always said this channel wasn't just me, but that of Cliqist and all the writers there, and now that's finally coming to fruition. On Cliqist.com, hardcore pogo enthusiast Felix Wong has been doing a series on the MMORPG Chronicles of Elria, I forgot to look up how to pronounce that, which is absolutely fantastic, and comrade Crimson and Clover learns us all about Fabular, a shmup with a fantastic name. Oh, we've also started doing deal articles and placing ads on the site. Yeah, I'd say it sucks, but I don't want to make the advertisers run away. I'd also advise you to support us on Patreon so we can get rid of those ads, but we wouldn't want to make Darth Vader or Nathan Drake angry, would we? Yes, we would, actually.